Hi, I'm Jack, and welcome back, because today I'm going to give you guys my review for the third season of the flagship Star Wars Disney+ show that just came to a close recently, The Mandalorian Season 3. Once again, the showrunners are Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni as they tell a new story with Din Djarin and Grogu. And let me know down below in the comment section, what's your take on Season 3 of the show? I'd love to know that down below. And with that said, let's get started. Season 3 follows Din Djarin and Grogu after the events of The Mandalorian Season 2 and the Book of Boba Fett, as he teams up with Grogu and Bo-Katan to go to Mandalore and redeem his past transgressions as they face new allies, new enemies, the era with the New Republic, while the potential return of the Empire looms. I loved the first two seasons of The Mandalorian. It was a nice, unique little Star Wars show set in between the events of Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, where we follow a bounty hunter making his way throughout the galaxy. Season 1 had this Western feel, new characters in this different time period of Star Wars, and I really enjoyed that first season with these new characters, the production quality, and even whether Season 1 was story-driven or had just little side quest episodes, it was still very enjoyable from beginning to end, and it led to a second season, which I really enjoyed. And although it's much more tied to the Star Wars lore with some cameo appearances from certain characters, I still greatly enjoyed Season 2 of the show, and it had a really good finale for me. As someone that loves the show at that time, I really enjoyed Season 2, and Book of Boba Fett I was not a big fan of, and because it reunited Din and Grogu, it really signaled concerns I had for Season 3, because now Din and Grogu are back together. That undoes something about Season 2's ending, and for a while I was both curious but nervous for the season heading into it. So now that I finally had the chance to see the entirety of The Mandalorian Season 3, I was disappointed in Season 3. It's by far my least favorite season of the show, and while it has its moments that I enjoyed, it did not work as well for me that much, and I was really underwhelmed with how it continues the story ideas it had. To kick off with the positives, my favorite character in this whole season is Bo-Katan, played very well by Katee Sackhoff. She played the character in animation with the Clone Wars and Rebels, and once again, she plays her in live action in The Mandalorian, and she is a delight. She is the character that, whenever she's on screen, I'm the most engaged with. She gets the most character arc, the most story of the season, and seeing how she grows throughout the season, I really enjoyed, and her scenes with Din Djarin and Grogu, I really enjoyed. And although her arc in the season does rehash elements of Star Wars Rebels Season 4, I still really enjoyed her side of the season that much, and I really liked her scenes with the characters, and she is just by far the most awesome character in the whole season, and she by far is the standout, both in terms of the character and in terms of the performance by the actress here. And although Pedro Pascal wasn't really on set filming the season because of The Last of Us, which I still have to make a review for, I still liked his voice performance as Din. Obviously, they had to work around circumstances with Pedro because of that show, but I liked his voice performance in the season majority of the time, and a lot of the other performers here I really enjoyed too, with some of the surprise appearances or the main characters throughout. I thought the cast did a good job with the material they had to work with. The action sequences are solid. They're very well shot. There's some good direction behind the camera with the directors of the season, Rick Famuyiwa, Bryce Dallas Howard, Peter Ramsey. Everybody here does a good job with directing the episodes they had to do, and they were able to do a good job of bringing the whole story to life from a visual standpoint. And the action sequences are shot very well. They look cool, especially having a lot of Mandalorian action this season, because we're not just focusing on the main characters, but a lot of the supporting players as well. Whether it's ship battles, characters on jetpacks, fighting in the air, fighting on the ground. It's really cool. And although I still preferred the action in the first two seasons here, Season 3 does every now and then have some action sequences that I found myself really enjoying and being engaged with. And I think they did a good job of directing and bringing these action sequences to life, especially in the final two episodes from director Rick Famuyiwa, where the finale has some really cool action sequences with Din, Bo, the other characters. So on the action front, I was entertained on that side. An aspect of Season 3 I did really enjoy is the Clan of Three dynamic between Djarin, Grogu, and Bo-Katan. It did play out differently than I expected it to, especially coming off of Season 2's ending. But I really enjoyed seeing all three of them together. There's some good scenes with each other. They have a nice dynamic with one another of them helping each other out. Whether it's them trying to reclaim Mandalore, them with other Mandalorians, them going on a mission. They have a nice dynamic with one another that actually feels like rather than having two, three is better. And I really liked having those three characters together for majority of the season when it comes to getting the task done. I really liked on that front with Pedro Pascal and Katee Sackhoff. I really liked just seeing those three characters together throughout the season. It did things differently on that front compared to Season 1 and 2, where it's largely just Din and Grogu. But this season, having another member be a part of that clan, I really enjoyed that. The visual effects for the show are good, even though not quite as up to par as they were in Seasons 1 and 2. It did feel like there's episodes where the visual effects look fantastic, like Episode 3, Episode 5, Episode 7. And then there are times where it's not the greatest in terms of the visual effects work, but in terms of how I felt about recent Star Wars Disney+ shows like The Book of Boba Fett and even Obi-Wan Kenobi, where the visual effects on that show really not that great at times. I thought Mandalorian Season 3 was serviceable. Not quite as visually superior looking as Seasons 1 and 2, but I did find myself liking the visual effects majority of the time with Season 3. Joseph Shirley takes over the duties of being the score composer for The Mandalorian Season 3 because Ludwig Göransson was busy working with Christopher Nolan on Oppenheimer, which is one of my most anticipated movies of the year. So he had to bounce out of doing the score for both The Mandalorian Season 3 and Creed 3, which is a great movie. And I was curious to see how are they going to make this work with the score. Is it going to feel empty? Is something going to feel different? And I do think Joseph Shirley did a good job with the score of the season. Yeah, it does take elements from Ludwig's scores for the other two seasons of Mandalorian, but especially in the later half of the season, I thought Joseph Shirley did a commendable job taking over the reins as composer to try to make some tracks and music for Mandalorian Season 3 in the wake of Ludwig's absence. The season also has some very interesting ideas with Din and the Darksaber, Mandalorians coming back together so that they can finally take back their planet. And even the canceled Rangers of the New Republic show had some elements of the New Republic spread throughout the season, which I think were interesting, does some things about the show I don't typically expect. But when it does something new, I appreciate that on that front. And so from that side of things, there are ideas there that I do really enjoy in Season 3. Depending on whether or not the presentation is good is a whole other thing I'll talk about later. But there are some neat ideas here, and I do think the way the season ends with Din and Grogu is an interesting choice. Don't entirely feel satisfied, but I'm not fully unsatisfied with it. I'm in the middle zone. It does feel like how I felt with the ending of Boba Fett, where the show leaves off Din and Grogu by the end of Season 3. It had some series finale feels to it, where this could function as an ending point, if that's what they do, even though there is a Season 4 in the works. So on that front, I do think that there's ideas in Season 3 I like, whether it's inherently good or inherently bad. And just the way it ends off Din and Grogu, I'm not entirely on board with, but there are ideas there that I thought are pretty cute. It does some things I expected it to, and it does leave me a little bit curious for where they're going to go next season. But that's just all up to see what's next for Din, Djarin, and Grogu, and where Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni go next. However, that leads me to my issues with Season 3, because I thought Season 3 was a big step down for the show comparing to Seasons 1 and 2. The first issue I have that comes to mind is the utilization of Din Djarin. I like Din. He's not the most deep Star Wars character of all time, but I really liked him in Seasons 1 and 2, and even in the Book of Boba Fett. Season 3 is my least favorite utilization of that character. In Boba Fett, he was one of the highlights of that show. In this season, he gets the same treatment as Boba Fett. sidelined for the other characters, doesn't get as much cool stuff to do. And he's a shell of who he once was. He doesn't feel as competent of a character the way he used to be, where he doesn't feel like he's as capable of doing missions on his own the way he used to be. It feels like he's always getting his butt kicked by everybody around him. He's always getting himself in these situations where it's like, oh, he can't do anything. He needs help. If you make your character, who was shown before to be a capable bounty hunter and a character, I at least expect him to be that way too in the season. But in season 3, he's just incompetent. They dumbed him down this season. He gets captured by a spider creature and tells Grogu, go find Bo-Katan and bring her back here. And then he gets rescued, and the first thing he asks her is, how'd you find me? Why? And it's like, did you forget what you asked Grogu to do? And that was really odd to me. And it regresses Din as a character to where it continues to not change him, but if it does change him, it's for the worst. And it wasn't until the final 2 episodes in where Din is finally becoming a more competent character that I remembered him being on the show before the season. And I really did not like how they utilize him. He had the Darksaber at the end of season 2, and I was so excited to see where that went. And I even thought Book of Boba Fett did a pretty good job with how they used that. Season 3 just tosses it all out the window. He barely uses it this season, and he just gives it up entirely like, oh yeah, I don't want it. No character arc, no change, no growth, nothing. He is just an incompetent version of who he once was. And it wasn't until the finale when they finally start to make Din be the character he always has been before this point. And I really hope in season 4 they at least push his character forward and that they at least handle him better than what they did with him in season 3. Because he got sidelined by so many characters. They did not make him seem as cool as he once was. And it just feels like they had nothing for him in terms of story. Another issue I have with season 3 is that Grogu's just there at this point. Season 2 wrapped up Grogu's story in a really good way, where Din completes his mission, Grogu's off with Luke and is going to become a Jedi. And that was a nice way to wrap up the story, and it had so much emotional weight behind it, and I actually teared up watching it. I watched season 3, and Book of Boba Fett did a lot of damage just by reuniting those two, which undermined season 2. This season did not give any real good narrative reason as to why they needed to be back together. Aside from like a few things about what Grogu does this season, Grogu adds nothing to the story. Grogu's just there at this point to be cute and to be like, you remember how cute Grogu was and the dynamic with Din Djarin? Yeah, I remember. Grogu didn't have any purpose or relevance in season 3.
What? No.
And they even reveal what happened to Grogu in Order 66. How exactly did Grogu survive that event? And while it was so cool to see Omid Best play a Jedi here, it didn't add anything to the season. After that, it's like, oh yeah, here's an origin story, and we're never going to explore it again. Unless season 4 is going to do something about it. That was just, what was the point of that? Grogu doesn't really add much anymore by this point by just being cute. There's no story reason for why Grogu's still on the show. It's just showing us exactly what we remember from the earlier seasons, but in a much less effective fashion. Season 3 also suffers from a lack of tension or momentum that looms throughout the season. I watched a lot of these episodes, and by the end of it, it didn't leave me like, oh, I can't wait for the next episode. I wonder what's going to happen next for the story. I sit there like, when's the actual story going to kick in? Any semblance of a plot did not begin until the penultimate episode. And it feels like they keep talking about how, oh, the plot's going to be about Din trying to help reclaim Mandalore, and that's not really what the season's about at all. It doesn't happen until the final 2 episodes where we really get to that point. But Din trying to redeem himself for his past transgressions by going to Mandalore, that is all done by episode 3. For half of the season in the middle, we're just meandering through side quests where we don't know what's the main goal here. What are they trying to accomplish? And if there's no tension or momentum or obstacles in the way that our characters have to overcome, then I'm left with a season that's left with so little weight and investment that I just sit there really feeling like we're dragging things out and that we could have expanded upon what actually matters. Because seasons 1 and 2 did have their episodes where it's just a side quest mission. But at least they were entertaining, and at least they had some interesting elements in there that I still was engaged with watching. There are half the season in season 3 where the side quest mission episodes are just not good. It feels like any semblance of a story idea the season had, it just finds a way to make it uninteresting, uninspiring, and unengaging, and it feels like it's just riddled with lazy writing. Why would some of these characters do this? Why would we spend time doing this when we could actually push the story forward that they had? It had good ideas with them trying to reclaim Mandalore and the Darksaber. They just don't do that many exciting things with it. And I just never felt any sense of tension or excitement every single week. There's no overarching threat in the season. It wasn't until the final 2 episodes where, oh yeah, Moff Gideon's out. That's right. He was our villain in seasons 1 and 2. We gotta take care of him again. We finished him off in season 2. And now that's undone. And so Moff Gideon doesn't come until later to remind us that we have a threat this season, because there was no threat this season. There was no overarching villain that our characters have to overcome. And the story is just like, go to Mandalore, redeem past transgressions, encounter a little spider, get myself redeemed, we're all good. They even have the mythosaur appear in episode 2 and in the finale for a few seconds at Bo-Katan's season. That's like a big thing, apparently. We never do anything with it again after that episode. It's, oh, I saw the mythosaur. The mythosaur is real. That doesn't matter. They don't do anything with it. And I'm like, there's so many things here that could have been so epic had it come back to play. It's like Chekhov's gun. If you have something that you built up to and you teased it in the beginning, you must use it by the time you reach your last half. And there's so many instances where so many storylines, so many things come into play earlier on in the season, and there's no payoff for them whatsoever. But my biggest issue of them all with season 3 is that it undoes season 2 entirely. The whole ending with Luke Skywalker coming in, saving the day, defeating Moff Gideon, Din getting the Darksaber, and Grogu going off with Luke, that doesn't mean anything anymore. Nothing about it is emotional or impactful because of where season 3 goes. Now, Din gave up the Darksaber to Bo-Katan, which, again, I can see why Bo-Katan would get the Darksaber back, but it's a less satisfying version of what we've seen in Star Wars Rebels Season 4. We undermined what happens there just to tell a new story with Bo-Katan, just so we can go back to the exact same place she was before. And Din getting the Darksaber could have been something so interesting, but they didn't do anything with it. There was nothing inherently exciting that they ended up doing with Season 3, despite how there's actually some really cool things there. And in the finale, they introduced that Moff Gideon has clones of himself. For a clone army, we all know that the sequel trilogy is going to later happen at some point, and they've had clones of Moff Gideon because he wants to use Grogu so that he can give them the Force and he can have a really powerful army to help bring the Empire back. And we get rid of the whole thing entirely in the exact same scene it was introduced in. Wasted potential. There's a lot of that in Season 3. Wasted potential. Great ideas. They don't do anything with it. Whether it's a good idea or a bad idea is all up for debate. But Season 3 just doesn't do a lot of captivating things with any of it. And it undermines Season 2 entirely to where if I were to ever rewatch those first 2 seasons, they're not going to hit the same because of Season 3 and even the Book of Boba Fett on that front. So it really pains me to say that. In the end, I was disappointed with the end result for The Mandalorian Season 3. It has its moments. I loved Bo-Katan. There's some good action sequences and some elements in there I like about the show. But as a whole, I thought the plot was directionless. There was no tension or anything for me to get excited about. And it really undoes a lot of major plot points about the show as the season went on. And it ends in a place where I really don't know what to expect in a way to be excited about for Season 4. So in the end, I'm going to give The Mandalorian Season 3 a C+. Time to talk about spoilers for Season 3. Moff Gideon in the season reminded me of a Space Gus Fring because he doesn't have the mustache. And it makes sense because he was filming the final season of Better Call Saul. And they kill him off in an unceremonious way. He has been established to be the show's villain since Season 1. And how they kill him off here, unless they're just going to secretly have him still be alive, I thought was unsatisfying. He just fights Din and Bo, and he just ends up burning alive. He just stands there and screams. I'm like, dude, you could have just done something to get away from it. That's all. Nobody kills him or defeats him or arrests him. It's just gets caught in an explosion. That's it. And then that got onto me because I love Giancarlo as his character, and I thought this season really underutilized him significantly. And again, Better Call Saul was being filmed for its final season, so I get it. But I just wish they did something more exciting and of interest with Moff Gideon this season, because it feels like they had some things there that could have been cool, but they just don't execute it in a way that's satisfying. And even the way the season ended, which Djarin finally adopts Grogu as his adopted son, which is weird because I thought this happened already back in season 1's ending. And Grogu now goes under Din Grogu, which meant Din's the last name of Djarin, which is a cool little idea there. I wish Din and Grogu stuck with Bo-Katan and the Mandalorians back on Mandalore because they got the planet back. And that they're going to rebuild the planet and make it habitable again, bring all the Mandalorians back together. And it's just so odd to me that once again, they just go off and do their thing again. There's no meaningful final conversation between Djarin or Bo-Katan. It's just, apparently Grogu used the Force and saved them, which is weird considering not only just the short time of training, which is 2 years apparently, but that just feels like a plot convenience. Like, how was Grogu all of a sudden able to do that to that extent? Then they go off to the New Republic, talk to one of the guys they trust at the New Republic, and we're like, hey, by the way, we're gonna do things for you every now and then, and just keep it under the rug. And I'm just like, I just don't really see what the greatest thing about that is. Din being a New Republic officer, I don't know. I'm not big on that idea. And I don't know exactly where that's going to go in season 4. I just hope if they're going to do that, they do a good job with it. Because, again, give Din growth. Because there wasn't any of that this season. And then the IG-11, IG-12 storyline, not a fan of. IG was destroyed at the end of season 1. And it made no sense to me whatsoever how the torso and the head are still attached to one another when the bomb was on his chest and it blew up. So that he can give them time to escape from the Empire. And the fact that pieces of him were intact was so weird. And episode 1, it's like, oh, hey, we gotta get him back together. And then we forget about it later. And then it wasn't until episode 7 when it's like, oh, yeah, remember that little side plot with IG-11? Let's bring him back together. That gives off a message of saying, thank you so much for protecting us. We're going to use your dead body to protect one of our living characters. That's a bad message. IG sacrificed himself for the characters, and this is what they do with this. I don't know. Never really been a fan of that whole IG storyline. I just didn't get it at all. And I just don't know what the thought process of all that was this season. I just thought I could have done without it because it didn't mean anything for most of the season. And then when it was used, it just feels really wrong with how they utilize droids. And that's just one thing I could have done without. However, it was cool to see Zeb show up from Star Wars Rebels, and it was also really nice to see just some little skirmish attacks with Pirate King Gorian Shard, who, not a big villain, but I thought he was fun for what he was. And just seeing the Mandalorians in action, Paz Vizsla's passing, I thought that was pretty emotional, although I wish they touched more upon it. But on that front, I thought there's some fun action moments every now and then. Just seeing the Mandalorians in action was very cool, and especially fighting the Empire. And even the fact that we got a cameo from Skinny Pete from Breaking Bad, I thought was awesome.
Yes! Hell yeah! Hey, come on, baby! Come on! Yes! Come on! Ah! Yes! Yes!
Overall, the season is just, it's average. There's stuff about it I like, and there's stuff about it that I really don't like. And it's not as bad as Book of Boba Fett, in my opinion, but it is kind of on par with Obi-Wan Kenobi in hindsight for me. Still love those first 2 seasons, but I do hope that season 4, or whenever we see Din Djarin and Grogu next, I do hope that it pushes them forward. It actually does something meaningful for them in a way that I felt like season 3 was lacking. So I hope that season 4 just balances back for this show. I hope they make up for the issues I had with the season and does something meaningful to remind me why I really liked the show in the first place. So yeah, that's my review for The Mandalorian Season 3. What are your thoughts on the season? Let me know down below in the comment section. I'd love to know your thoughts on it. Stay tuned for some upcoming videos I have planned very soon. I'm going to have a review for The Last of Us Season 1 at some point, and so is a movie review for Renfield. So stay tuned for all that fun stuff coming your way very soon. And don't forget to follow me on social media. My username is down below at the bottom of the screen and in the description below. So please go do that while you're at it. And thank you guys so much for watching. And don't forget to hit that like button and the subscribe button. And stay tuned for more.
Go!